Welcome to the DC Pod. I'm your host, Christian, joined as always by Dallas diehard Darcy. Darcy, how are you?
I'm good, mate. The Mavs are back on a bit of a winning trend and some massive news in the NBA for us to talk about today. So I'm good. I'm real good.
Yeah, league is ridiculous, never fails to disappoint, only adds more drama and intrigue to the season with the news that obviously went down yesterday. So we'll cover that big Harden trade. We'll go over some contenders v pretenders. I want to touch on a bit of Philly. I know we're not the only team to be impacted by Corona, but man, I was pretty upset the last, let's say, 2 or 3 games. That's for sure. I guess we'll touch on as well the league postponing games in general, because it seems to be coming every day or every other day. And of course, we'll finish on locks of the day. So big episode for you guys today. Roll the intro.
Lead pass. Whoa! Stop it! Stop it! Do not do it like that! What are you doing, Dragons?
Parker.
J.O. Smith! We just saw men fly! Iguodala to Curry. Back to Iguodala. Up for the layup. Oh, blocked by James! LeBron James with the rejection. Decide not to use it. Curry way downtown. Bang! Bang! Oh, what a shot from Curry! Play hard. Step back. Puts up the three, got hit, shot's good, and one! James Harden double team, and a chance for a 4-point play.
So as I said from the top, we've obviously got to address this massive Harden deal. It's changed the landscape of the NBA, specifically the Eastern Conference, but I think just the championship race in general. I'll throw it over to you, Das, however you want to address it, but the Harden trade, what are your thoughts?
A bit of an unpopular opinion, but I love it. I reckon it's huge. A team's thrown themselves genuinely into the conversation for the championship. I don't know if I'm LeBron or AD. I'm looking at this going, okay, we have a serious challenger right now. There's not going to be the same old from last year when it comes to the playoffs. We're talking about a team with 3 superstar players, 2 MVPs, and one guy has hit one of the biggest shots in NBA history. So it's amazing. I reckon it's huge. For me, I got big Miami Big 3 vibes when I saw this trade go through. We're talking about 3 absolute all-star stud players on one team. You know, we're talking about this is what the Brooklyn Nets were thinking in my eyes when they signed Durant. They were hoping that they'd be in this situation where they've got a super team, when they've got a team of just insane talent, like 3 guys who are absolute studs in this league, can't be denied that they are. And I think this is what they were thinking about when they signed him. Even though Durant had that injury, they were thinking, if we get Durant, we only need one more all-star, and then we're looking at a championship team. And I think even though they have to fix up probably the rest of their roster and kind of fit it together with these 3, they've got championship potential already. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm opposite to you. I hate it. I think I'm like everyone else. I don't know. It feels like, look, obviously to get these top 5 guys, you've got to give up a lot. So the draft compensation does seem probably pretty fair in the end. I know with the Anthony Davis deal, everyone was like, holy crap, like that is a lot for the Lakers to give up. And now where are those guys? They're just in their hole, because how can you argue with the championship and looking every chance to, potentially repeat? So if we're in the situation where it's end of the season and Brooklyn have won, the chip, we obviously can't say much, but man, they're definitely going through that mortgaging their future situation to try and capitalize on the present, similar to how they did it with the Celtics deal. So I'm just as fascinated as everyone else, but just looking off the bat, I hate it. The only thing I do love is that potentially Daryl Morey helped here to up the price that Brooklyn had to pay. I don't know exactly what was on the table for Harden, but it was Simmons and potentially Thibault, or even Maxey was thrown out there. It didn't feel like that Houston were going to be able to get this sort of draft compensation they got from Brooklyn. I don't think Philly would have given up, 4 firsts and 4 pick swaps on top of Simmons and, another young guy. It felt like it would have kind of been one or the other. So interestingly enough, it feels like Houston decided against Ben Simmons, because it feels like if they did want to get him, they could. So Houston obviously wasn't potentially a big fan of that. The other thing is, my initial reaction is, as lethal as having these 3 guys on your team will be, like, Dust, the question is, how does everyone, get their touches? Because there's only one ball.
I think in the regular season that will be a bit of a problem. It'll be a definite growth part for them. I think it's pretty good in superstar insurance. You've got a quite injury-prone player in Kyrie Irving, and we understand that Durant's coming off an injury. He's already resting in certain games. And when he is playing, he's playing a lot of minutes. So this will definitely kind of loosen the load on those guys. But I feel like when they're on the court together, I feel like they're going to outscore teams, and then they're going to be able to hit the bench, similar to the way that the Warriors were doing it with Durant and Curry and Thompson, when they were able to build a big lead and then still manage their guys' minutes throughout the year. Harden, I think it's huge for him to be on a different team. I think a lot of the reason for the reaction, the negative reaction to the trade, is the way that they went about it, especially Harden. Everyone saw the press conference where he basically called out his team saying, "We're not good enough. We just lost to the Lakers. Like, we're not good enough. I tried as hard as I could," even though obviously trying hard as you could, James Harden, does that include, not showing up to camp on time or not following COVID protocols? But clearly Harden did put a lot into the kind of championship run that Houston have been having for the last few seasons there. For him to now move over to a different team, I expect him to lose some weight, for one thing. but there'll be a big change in his kind of determination and his drive to become a championship player, because it's a complete reality right now. As soon as he steps on the court with Brooklyn, he has a genuine chance and almost an obligation to perform in the playoffs and be a championship player. I think that kind of motivation for him can't be understated. And I think he really needs to show up in big games, and he's going to get a chance for it now. They're guaranteed going to be in the playoffs. Houston would have had to fight to get into it. I think it's guaranteed that Brooklyn will be in it. And now he's going to find himself in a situation where he's got two superstar teammates and they're going right for the championship. I think the biggest question with the trade, I think when you talk about the fit and how the ball's going to be passed around in Brooklyn, I know Durant, we've seen with his time in Golden State that he is a great versatile player. He is great off the ball. He's proved that he can share the ball and he can do lots of things on the defensive end. So I'm not concerned about anyone fitting in next to Durant. I think that's pretty easy. The one thing is, what kind of role or what kind of change in role are we going to see from Kyrie? So Kyrie, he's come out the season looking great, by the way. Every game that he's played, he's looked really, really strong, and he's shooting really great clip, and his assisting to turnover ratio is awesome so far. So I guess what it comes down to, is there enough ball? I don't think it's a problem with Durant. He'll get his shots, but who's going to do a lot of the ball handling responsibility? I think when it comes down to it, Harden or Kyrie Irving, Harden is a superior player. He's a superior ball handler. And I think the responsibility in terms of running the team from a point guard perspective will fall on Harden. And I'm sure that's what James wants. And it's just where Kyrie will fit in there. How many shots will he get? What kind of scoring output will we get from him? And in a lot of ways, that kind of puts pressure off Kyrie as well. It's like, come out here and get buckets, and when we don't have to worry about it too much, because we've got probably the best ball handler in the league now running our show. So I think that's kind of the main question mark about the fit, is where Kyrie will kind of slot in, how many shots he'll get. But I think you're looking at three bona fide, 20-point per game scorers, and I'd be betting on them to win the East for sure.
Okay, huge. Well, firstly, I'll just address, obviously, with Harden, he's got to get a gym membership in Brooklyn, that's for sure. His weight is a joke. And the thing is, do you know where Kyrie is? Firstly, can we find him? Do we know he is in Brooklyn? Is he in the US? Has he gone on holiday somewhere?
I wouldn't be surprised if he kind of sits out for another month or so and lets Harden get acclimatized to this new team and then tries to make his way back into the fold. It is bizarre with Kyrie, but we already knew that.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that adds to your point about kind of superstar insurance as well, because who's to say Kyrie in 12 months' time doesn't go like, I've had enough, and just retires? I mean, I've seen it, put out there by a few other people just in the American media landscape, and it doesn't seem so ridiculous as it potentially did a year or two ago. But I still just struggle to see how all of those guys will just 100% buy in and be happy, because any teammate that Harden has ever had has eventually been like, oh, this sucks. I don't enjoy this at all.
Yeah.
For the most part.
how do you like the starting lineup of Joe Harris fitting in there, who's been shooting the 3-ball great, and obviously their best friend in DeAndre Jordan? They've got a problem now with no backup center, but I'm sure that can be fixed. There'll be plenty of ring-chasing centers wanting to get around this Brooklyn team, I think. But that starting lineup with DeAndre and Joe Harris and these 3 stars, man, that's tough.
It is lethal. That you can easily look at, man, who will they defend? But the immediate response to that is, well, who will the opposition? How will they defend like that starting fight? Like that's ridiculous. So definitely a big price to pay. But I mean, yeah, it's hard to see, as you say, anyone being better than them at the moment. It's just a matter of if those guys buy in, because if they do, then it does spell trouble for the league. But maybe
it's hard. It's hard to give away really good players, and I really like Jared Allen. He's been great in his first couple of seasons, especially at the start of this season. Karras had a couple monster games already in the first 2 weeks of the season. I like his game, but then you throw it up. It's like, okay, we can go all in for a championship right now. We've got 2 great assets. They're probably at the peak of their selling power. Let's sell them now while we can get James Harden. And I'm all about GMs and teams going all in. You know, the Mavericks are a team who are never gonna shy away from the potential to get a superstar and make a trade and put yourself into the championship conversation. So I really like that Brooklyn have gone for it. They're all in.
Yeah. Quickly touching on that, who do you like better for, let's say, the other guys in the trade? So obviously LeVert ended up to the Pacers. Jared Allen ended up in Cleveland. Is there one of those two that you like better, or you like him just as equal?
I think I like Jared Allen at Cleveland because they've just picked up a great young player, a really good young player. And now that's insurance for what's going to happen with Drummond. Yep. You know, he's been putting up numbers, but you can tell he's putting up those numbers so he can get another contract. He doesn't want to be there long term, even though they look like they're playing. They had some good chemistry out the jump, but I'm almost certain that Drummond will be on the move. And then you're looking at Nance and Jared Allen in the front court in Cleveland. And I quite like that going forward. So I think that's a good fit. So that was a good trade. And then I'm not really sure how much better Indiana gets with this trade of swapping Oladipo for LeVert. I really like LeVert, and I think LeVert is a bit more diverse offensively than Oladipo. He's a better passer, I think. Oladipo has shown flashes already of the old self in the first games of the season. He's shooting the ball quite well. He's scoring close to 20 a game. Threw down a couple of big dunks. So, you know, he's still got that athleticism despite the kind of injury troubles he's had. I think LeVert will be a good fit with Indiana, and it'll be interesting to see how that kind of all works out. I'm touching on them later in the pod, but okay. I think that trade, that swap was quite even, I thought. So I think the Cavs, well, what did the Cavs give up? They gave up Dante Exum, our boy.
And the first round pick that was actually from the Bucks. So that'll end up being a late first. So for Jared Allen, like, that guy could be the future center for them for the next 10 years. I don't know. It seems like a pretty good deal to me.
Yeah, steal for the Cavs, I reckon, and a bit of a straight swap with the Indiana and Houston one. Interesting that Oladipo, he's not playing one game for Houston. He wants out. He wants to go somewhere else. Apparently, Miami is the preferred destination.
Yeah, well, if you're touching on it later, I don't want to go into it too much, but I know there was some things that a lot of the Pacers guys didn't like Oladipo. You know, coming into the season, there was word that all of last year, Oladipo was telling opposition teams, like, I want to come play for you. Yeah. Like, I want to play with you.
He didn't want to come to the bubble. He didn't want to come to the bubble.
No,
and that
definitely not.
Sends a strong message to your team. Yeah.
So
you know, they've run their course with him, I think, in a lot of ways. So he had to be moved.
Yeah. And just to touch on it just quickly, interestingly enough, man, the Pacers played pretty damn hard against Golden State when Oladipo missed that game, and we're able to come away with a pretty good win. And we're recording this on Friday afternoon, the 15th. And I don't know what the score is now, but the Pacers are at Portland, and I saw the halftime, they were up by 23. So wow. I think the Pacers really do kind of love playing without Oladipo. There could have been some real chemistry things there that we didn't see behind the scenes. But we'll leave that for you to hit on later when you speak about it in the pod. Anything you want to touch on from the Philly side of things? Because they were obviously the other player potentially in that deal. You said you love GMs that go all in, and the fact that Philly sort of held back from going all in. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think, they could have gone all in with Harden. It would have been very interesting. I think when you get Harden and Embiid, that's an interesting fit. Um, I don't think that kind of making that trade, getting rid of a superstar like Simmons and then bringing in a superstar Harden, I think that doesn't necessarily guarantee you to come out of the East. That doesn't give you a good enough lineup to say we're definitely more talented than a Milwaukee, So, or even Brooklyn as they were constructed before the trade. So I think there was a lot of more risk going on from Philly if they were to make that trade with Harden. And if it didn't work out with Harden straight away with Embiid, with that chemistry, then all of a sudden you've just lost your best asset in Ben Simmons for something that's gone wrong. And there's not as much risk when it comes to Brooklyn because KD has already played with James Harden. He knows his game so well. And these guys have clearly wanted to play together. To me, it didn't seem like Embiid and Harden were best friends at all. And we know that these guys in Brooklyn this season, they've already spoken publicly about how they want to play together. So I think it was more of a sure thing for Brooklyn to make that move. Too much risk for Philly. And I still like Philly's chances to go up against all the elite teams in the Eastern Conference. I think they're rolling right now, and Embiid's been an absolute beast. And Doc Rivers right now at the moment seems to be a good fit with Ben and Joel.
Yeah, well, I think that was the thing people were kind of a little bit on edge about. So there was a lot of fence sitters being, well, we don't want to give up Ben, but shit, Embiid is playing MVP caliber. So we want to maximize that because his concerns in the past have been all related to health. So if we can get another season or two of this level of play out of Embiid, I don't know if we can. It'd be great if we could, but who's to say he doesn't break down in 12 months' time after a really big season this year? So, look, I think they'll keep it going until the trade deadline. Just get more of a sample of how this team really fits. And who knows, there could be a Brad Beal trade down the line that could be there closer to the deadline that Philly may be a part of if, Morey doesn't really like what he sees. I wouldn't be surprised if he pulled the trigger on that because I actually think Beal but I think he actually is a better fit next to Embiid anyway.
Philly aren't done. There was no guarantee. I'm not sure about how that fit with Embiid and Harden would have been, but Philly aren't done with their moves. They've still got plenty of kind of room to wiggle, and coming up to the deadline will be interesting. I'm not ready to sell my Simmons Philly jerseys yet, though, so I'm going to hold on to them.
I was worried about that, and I know you've got yours on your thing, but yesterday morning for, a good hour there, when, there were still rumors of the deal haven't been finalized, I was like, man, I don't know if this jersey suddenly become valueless because obviously he's not on the team. But anyway, thank goodness we didn't pull the trigger on that deal. Okay, so Contenders v Pretenders. We're basically just under a month into the season. So we've got about a 10-game sample at least, us. Do you want to get started with your first contender? And then I'll head over to mine.
Okay, no news splash here. All right, the Milwaukee Bucks are still for real. I picked them when it came to bracket time in the playoffs last year. They're leading the league in scoring right now. Not much of a surprise. They've been the best team in the regular season the last 2 years. They're averaging 120 points per game. They're doing it with ease at times, blowing teams out. Giannis, as we know, he's looking unstoppable. 26, 10, and 5, over a steal and a block a game on 50% shooting. Guy just gets it done. I really know that their team's going to go as far as he can go and as far as he takes them. Giannis, he continues to kind of be dominant, absolutely dominant in games. And, we've seen him for the last 2 years. Teams are game planning for him every single game. And look, guess what? It's not working. So we'll wait and see what happens in the playoffs. But they're going to be a contender. If he can show up in playoff time and put up these kind of numbers, 26, 10, and 5, then they're going to be a genuine championship contender. What I like right now is their spread. Middleton, he's averaging 21 a game, 6 rebounds, 6 assists on 54% shooting. He's always been a very efficient shooter. Holiday, their new addition, 15 points a game on almost 50% shooting. Bobby Portis has been a nice surprise off the bench for them, 12 and 8 boards on 56% shooting. And DiVincenzo's up at 11 points a game. So they got 5 guys averaging in double figures. DiVincenzo's on 45% as well. And the way that they're shooting the three, we know that they're a deadly 3-point shooting team. It's kind of come to a head in the playoffs when they've gone cold in important stretches on offense, shooting the three because they shoot a lot. But right now they're making 16.5 threes a game as a team on 41%. So this team is wet. This team can shoot. And for me, they're still right in the championship conversation. They'll go as far as Giannis takes them, but I think the number 1 seed is looking really good already. Even if Brooklyn start to get rolling, I think there's, the one team we'll be setting the pace will be the Bucks. These solid contributors I spoke about, I think, they're important and they're going to take the pressure off Giannis. If those guys can give them 10 points a game throughout the playoffs, it's going to take that little bit of pressure off Giannis where he can kind of do his thing to contribute and kind of take his game to the next level without, being kind of the one guy left out. It felt like in the playoffs last year, Middleton was that one guy left to have to do the whole thing if Giannis wasn't playing well. Now I feel like they've got a little bit of an extra option with Holiday and maybe a bit of kind of resurgence from Bobby Porter playing the Mavs tomorrow. Huge game. They got the Mavs in Milwaukee. Last couple of times, Mavs have been able to get them at Milwaukee. So this will be a real playoff game, a real playoff atmosphere, I reckon.
Yeah, well, this is kind of what I've wanted to see from the Bucks, a game that like tomorrow, because for the most part, I think they've had a pretty easy schedule. Like they've played the Pistons 3 times. Teams. I think they've played Charlotte in there. They played Golden State. They've played a lot of pretty average teams. So I'm keen to see their schedule get a little bit harder. I want to see them get a bit tested because there are a few tough games they've had. I know they lost with the Tatum Bank 3. That was pretty BS for the most part. Pretty unlucky to lose that one. But I'm keen to see them get tested. During the regular season, they obviously carve up. They have the last few years. But I need to see it to believe it with their postseason success. I mean, they've faltered the last few seasons when it's really mattered. And for the most part, a lot of people look to Budenholzer as a coach that just was unable to make adjustments when things were going south. They were up 2-0 against the Raptors a couple of years ago. And then they went on to lose the next 4 games. In the bubble, they obviously got they didn't get swept, but they lost in 5, right, to Miami. So
Middleton won them 1 game.
Correct, that's right. And I know Giannis was injured early in that series with his ankle, but the facts are that they've really failed in the postseason. So for me, I just see it. I need to see it before I believe it type thing. And there's every chance that it could be this year, but I definitely want to see it with my own eyes first. My first contender, Das. Not Philly. I've got Phoenix. Now, cool. I just have been really impressed by their start to the season. The impact of obviously Chris Paul has been enormous. They have completely changed really how they play. There's no up and down, fast pace. They're a really slow pace, half-court team. But with that change, they've actually got a phenomenal offensive system where they get a ton of great looks. They take a lot more mid-range jump shots, and effectively almost every offensive possession, they seem to get a good look at the basket, which is something that unless they were running up and down the floor, beating teams that way, they were never really getting easy looks at the basket. It always seemed like it was a Booker isolation where he just had to hit a very tough shot, or even working through 8 in the post a little bit last year, using Rubio's passing ability out of the pick and roll. So now that CP3's in here, he's changed the dynamic completely. They've had some really good wins to start the year. I can rattle off a few teams. You go Dallas, Utah, Denver. The Utah-Denver wins were off back-to-backs. They've beaten Toronto, who might not seem like much, but man, Toronto were fighting pretty hard those first 5-6 games to get wins.
Never an easy win.
Never an easy win. They beat Indiana on the road the other day. So there's a lot to like. Yes, they have had a couple of blowout losses. They got blown out to the Wizards. They got blown out to the Clippers. Well, it ended up being close, but for the most part, that Clippers game was a blowout. But I mean, there's going to be plenty of games this season for most teams that you can just look at and be like, that's a write-off, that's an outlier. So those 2 games in particular don't worry me. I like what I've seen from the starters as a whole. We've spoken in the pod with Kyle about Mikal Bridges and how impressive he's been. He then dropped 30 plus against the Pacers.
Career high after our pod. Yeah.
Exactly. So that we'll call that the DC.
Maybe he's an all-star.
The DC bump. We'll call that the DC bump, all right? If we speak about a guy and he goes off, that's because of us.
Like that.
I like the bench. They've got Cam Johnson. Saric has come back. Campaign hasn't played the last couple of games, and so they've just welcomed Javon Carter back into the lineup. So, it feels like they're stacked. They've even got a guy that many people have forgotten about, Langston Galloway. Like he can at least score. If nothing else, he can score. So Definitely an under the radar guy in that department. And the thing we haven't really seen yet, again, we spoke about it with Kyle, is that Booker hasn't gone off. He hasn't had that 35, 40-point game yet, which is something that makes me very high.
Or 70-point game.
Or 70-point game if you're the Celtics. Yeah, we haven't seen that yet. We haven't seen really Ayton have a truly dominant game. And the thing that I really like as well about Phoenix and why I think their current style of play is extremely sustainable, especially in the postseason, is their defense. So they rank really high for that side. They're in the top half of the league. And I just think teams that are already locking down opposition players, I do think that, that's something that's extremely sustainable, and it's key in playoff series, obviously, because it's not just about outscoring people when, times get tough offensively, when the whistle's not being blown, fouls aren't being called in the postseason. You need to be able to get a stop on the other end if your offense is really struggling. So I think it's something that's translatable to the postseason for Phoenix. So they're my contender.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think you're right. Their offense does look very methodical. I think with CP in the pick and roll, and then with Devin Booker obviously learning a lot more about when to shoot, when to attack, when to facilitate. You're right. When I watch them, they get quality shots every offense, and a lot of it has to do with their setup of guys on the wing who can shoot the ball. We talk about Cam Johnson and Mikal Bridges and Langston Galloway. There's guys that bring off the bench. Saric is a good outside shooter. The big guy, he's settling into a nice role. I think I can't remember quote that I saw from him was something about I don't actually care about getting post touches. I don't care about scoring the ball. I'm the defensive anchor for this team. That's my job. And if I'm able to pick up points at a high shooting percentage, then that's what I'm going to do. So they all seem very committed to winning. And I think a lot of that's about the maturity of their players and about having Chris Paul in the fold. They're talking about how to win games, and they're not talking about how to get numbers up anymore. They're talking about, let's do whatever it takes to win. And I think you're seeing that right now. You talk about those quality wins. That's really, really big. I can't wait to see them in the playoffs.
Is it Ayton's second year? Third year? Yeah. And he's saying the quotes like that he doesn't care about post touches.
Well, a coach like Monty Williams, I think he's really getting through to them, and Booker's a bona fide leader in this team. He is the face of the franchise, and CP3 is that veteran that they can lean on. And it's true. We know that he's got a nice little jump shot in a bit of game, but that kind of back down, take a tough contested shot or go up against a tough guy in the post, that's not really an efficient shot, I suppose, in today's kind of NBA. And the way that they're playing offensively, they're maximizing their efficiency for sure.
Yeah, well, great point about Ayton. Anytime you see Ayton catch the ball in the post, he hates to back the guy down. He just wants to face up immediately and take that little jumper.
He's a finesse player, yeah.
Yeah, he's not a guy that's going to bully ball you and try to work down deep. So yeah, that's a good point you make. And another thing that you said about Monty Williams that it just reminded me, the team does really respond to him. And if you're worried about the buy-in, you can see how well they did in the bubble, right? Going under 8-0. You just go back to that 8-0. And so there is definitely a lot to like.
I think the only potential little kind of hole potentially or area where they might struggle is if something happens to Ayton. If he misses a couple of games, I don't think they really have size on the bench. Saric is a strong player, but he's not really tall. They don't really have that bona fide backup center. So I think they're still in the market for someone like that.
Yeah, well, it seems like if it's not Brooklyn, then it's also Phoenix that could be in the market for a buyout big. Potentially a guy like Andre Drummond, if Cleveland can't find a trade partner for him. He could be a pretty in-demand guy if they decide to buy him out. Pretenders. So there's been a lot of teams here that, might look good, but is it sustainable? Or a lot of teams that are underperforming and you might think, no, that's actually something that's real. I'm buying that. So do you want to take it away with your first pretender?
Okay, so I found this quite hard because the teams, when I'm talking about pretenders, I'm talking about teams who have championship aspirations and are kind of right there. So they're winning teams. They're teams who play good basketball, but teams who I really don't think when it gets down to the playoffs have a genuine shot at winning the finals. So for me, it's Utah. What I've seen for them, they didn't make any changes in the offseason. They brought in Clarkson at the end of last year, and he's third in their team in scoring. So I think that's where the main problem is for them. I just haven't seen enough scoring from them offensively and diversity in their offense for them to be a genuine contender. I still think they're really, really reliant on Mitchell, and they're relying on him to go off big in big games. I think they need that 30 or 40 points on efficient shooting from him in a really big game to win. We saw how amazing he was in that series against Denver. He was otherworldly. He was playing out of his absolute skin, and they couldn't get it done. You know, like, how much more are you going to ask of Donovan Mitchell right now? Were they able to bring in someone else who gets 20 a game? From so far this season, they haven't been able to get it. Bojan's kind of off to a bit of a slow start. He's averaging 13 points a game, and I'm not sure how much we can rely on him to score. I like his game, and he is a good shooter, and he's the type of guy who will take the other team's three man and have a good job in that matchup. But you're not going to be able to rely on him for 20 points a game in a playoff series. Clarkson, I also like too, but I just don't think they have enough paint presence in terms of scoring the ball. Mitchell does get to the basket quite nicely, but when you talk about, you know, Gobert, he's only averaging 11 points a game. And obviously, I don't think he's that talented offensively, but they need to find something else around scoring. They need to find another way to score in the paint, or whether it's Gobert kind of elevating his game to become more of a scorer, or I think they need to make a move. They need to pick someone up. When you look at their depth chart, coming off the bench, they've got Royce O'Neal, Derek Favors, and George Niang, and they're expecting them to produce as role players. You know, they need that depth to be amazing to win games in the playoffs. They need them to play out of their skin. They need Ingles to play a great game for them to win in the playoffs. I just don't think they have enough, and I don't think doing nothing in the offseason has hurt them. I think their record looks good. They'll definitely be in the playoffs, and they'll be a tough out. Like, don't get me wrong. But we're talking about championship contenders here. From what I've seen for them so far, I don't think they're good enough offensively. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I am still kind of a little bit high on Utah. I'm not completely going to put them in the pretender category, but everything you've said is, you know, more than fair. I think the thing that you're looking at with who's that other guy other than Mitchell, I think they're hoping for Mike Conley to really step up and go back to the Memphis Mike Conley that, you know, they traded for last year and they definitely didn't get. He needs to step up his production. So far, he's been okay, Mike. He's been a little bit inconsistent, but there have been some flashes where they've really shown that Mike can, you know, still produce, whether it be in a pick and roll. As soon as he gets a guy on his back, Mike can hit a floater with his right or left. So I think it's just a matter of Mike Conley's elite at floaters. It's unbelievable. I think if he can, champion. Yeah, that's right. I think if he can, you know, he doesn't have to be the exact same guy he was in Memphis, but if he can get back to being something very similar, I think that adds another dynamic to that Utah starting lineup. And I think it does give them that guy that they're missing. I really want to see Donovan Mitchell get to the rim. Like, I want to see him get like 8 free throws a game. Like, it seems to pick and choose.
Though. He's so athletic, and his pull-up game is great. But you look at him, he's only like 6'1". He's tiny. True. I know it looks different because he's flying, but he can't take LeBron to the rim. You know what I mean? Going up against Durant and even Harden is going to be tough for him. I think you're right. Conley I think he's second in their team in scoring, so he's off to a pretty good start. But I think it's at 17 a game. But I don't know. The best Mike Conley, I suppose, statistically, he was up to 22, 23 game that last season in Memphis, where they basically had when they were praying for ping pong balls, and he was just out there straight balling. But I think when he's played his best ball in clutch situations in the playoffs, he's been that stable point guard who's been able to get 15 points, dish out close to 10 assists, and really facilitate. I think when it comes to the playoffs, I'm not expecting him to come out of his role as that really strong point guard. I'm not expecting him to become a 25 points per game kind of guy. I think it's too much to kind of expect that out of him.
Interesting. No, I think he can do it. I think he can.
It would be an interesting story if he hit that game-winning shot against Game 7.
In and out.
A lot of confidence comes in from winning a playoff series, and for him and for the entire team's trust in him to be that guy. You know, hitting a game winner in Game 7. Oh God, it was in and out as well. It was around the rim. They could have beaten Denver. Could have been in the Western Conference Finals. But for me right now, I just don't see it with Utah. But I wouldn't mind being proven wrong.
Yeah, I'm not giving up on them yet, but I think a team that I'm very close to giving up on if I haven't already, I've got Denver down as my pretender, Das.
Okay.
I guess, yes, Jokic is playing unbelievable ball. His numbers are through the roof. I don't really need to go over that. They're just absurd. If you have them in fantasy, you're absolutely laughing. Jamal Murray is the guy I'm really worried about. So he's fallen off a cliff. You speak about Donovan Mitchell and how he went berserk. Jamal Murray was just as impressive in that series. And it clearly wasn't sustainable, the numbers he was putting up. But, I mean, the team won't go far this year if Murray keeps underperforming. Like some games he'll drop 20, other games he'll drop 8 or 9. And it's just like, man, what's going on?
Is he an all-star or not? It's hard to tell right now.
It's very hard. So then the worrying thing for me is, God, Denver don't defend anybody. Like you talk about the Wizards and them, not being able to guard a parked car or whatever the quote was from Brad Beal, but Denver are no better. Like, man, they can't stop anyone. And I think they're starting to really feel the losses of Jeremy Grant and Torrey Craig just defensively. Those were a couple of wing stoppers.
And Plumlee.
True, and Plumlee. Say what you want about him in Detroit, but he was at least a guy that gave great effort, and he would definitely protect the rim a little bit. So they're definitely missing those three guys, including Plumlee, on the defensive side of the ball. And I actually have them as a way for me to see them as not a pretender anymore. I think they've got to find a way to get Brad Beal. I think they have to use Porter in a trade along with young pieces or draft picks.
Gary Harris, maybe.
Gary Harris. They have some contracts there. They've had some contracts there that'll work to be able to get a guy like Brad Beal. And if they can, then I'll put him into the contender status because I think Brad Beal is unbelievable. And a guy like Jokic being able to work with Brad Beal is pretty ridiculous. And Brad Beal may not be an elite defender, but shit, he sure as heck tries. And that's all you can really ask from an offensive superstar like Brad Beal. So that's the only pathway I see Denver being able to move from pretender to contender for me, because the defense is embarrassing for the most part.
What do you reckon about it? It could be a bit of a hangover from obviously a long campaign in the bubble. They came back from 3-1 down twice, and that takes a lot out of you. It's clearly taken a lot out of Murray. Hasn't taken much out of Jokic. He looks $1 million. But I suppose the whole team, I guess, even Mike Malone is they're missing Porter right now, which kind of hurts. I'm not sure what their record is. It isn't too good, but throughout the regular season, as it goes on, I think you'll find those trips to Denver for away teams will continue to be very, very difficult. And, there'll be a team in the playoffs almost guaranteed just because they win so many home games.
Yeah. Look, it's fair that it could be because of a hangover, but I just hated what I've seen these first 10, 11, 12 games. I mean, they had a pretty good road trip recently. But yeah, I don't know. They're playing Golden State today. If they can't even get past a team like Golden State, it'd be worrying because that's a team that's competing hard in the West. So that's a team that I'm just not very high on, let alone think they'll be championship worthy.
It falls on Murray, I think, so far, for sure.
Yeah. Do you want to hit on a second contender?
Okay, yeah. Who else do I reckon can win the championship this year? Just watched enough of these guys in the last week that I still think they're balling, and we talked about them in the preseason, the Portland Trailblazers. I think they are as good a fourth quarter team as there is in the NBA. We already know how established and how confident everyone is in Dame Lillard in the fourth quarter. But what about CJ McCollum? CJ McCollum's actually playing better than Dame right now. He's playing as good as anyone in the league. If you haven't been watching, go check him out. He's scorching hot right now. 28 points, 4 rebounds, 5 assists, 1.5 steals on 47% shooting. He's making 5 threes a game on 41%. This guy's absolutely cooking. For me, he's an all-star right now. There's no doubt in that. And something that's great about CJ, not only is he a bit of an unheralded guy, similar to Brad Beal, not talked about as much in that kind of all-star echelon, but he gets better every year. And it's so clear to me right now, the confidence in his game off the dribble and obviously shooting the three-pointer. He's the difference for me right now for Portland, especially when it comes to clutch scoring. 2 years ago when they made it to the Western Conference Finals, he single-handedly won them that Game 7 at Denver when Dame, wasn't having his best game. He's proven that he can do it in the playoffs. He's got playoff experience, and it just makes their fourth quarter lineup that much more deadly when CJ's balling at an all-star level. Portland, when you speak about their depth, they haven't really locked into what their rotation is right now. They're playing Derek Jones Jr. a little bit too much for me, but I can understand why. They're trying to fit him in, trying to see if he can kind of pencil in a little role in their team as a really strong, versatile defender. But he's struggling to shoot the ball right now, and so is Covington. Covington's still making an adjustment. We talked about it in the preseason. We like the fit, and we reckon that those two guys will slot in really nicely as the season goes on. And they're going quite well right now. They're still winning games. They're still trying to figure out that depth and how that kind of works. But I reckon they're on the right track with that. And to further on from that, Gary Trent Jr., he's the X factor for them. Every game that I look at the box score, if he's played 25 minutes plus, he's making 4, 5, or 6 threes in a game, and he's their X factor. Whenever he gets ball and hits a few threes, they're well over 100 points easily. And they give some great scoring balance, and that'll get them through to that fourth quarter. And then you say, okay, Dame and CJ, take us home, guys. And when you talk about a guy like Cantor, who I talked about how I've liked him, and I like that pickup, guys shooting 68% from the field, getting 10 points and almost 8 boards. He's one of the most efficient guys coming off the bench right now in the entire league. And I don't know if anyone tuned into that. They had a really good game against Toronto, where Toronto were ahead the whole game, really shooting the ball well. Boucher was balling. Siakam was absolutely balling. And then in the fourth quarter, Melo came in and balled. Melo just waited for his time. He's finally accepting a role off the bench, and he's thriving. In the fourth quarter, they went to a really cool lineup with him basically at the 5 spot or at the 4 spot right in there. And say what you want about his defense, he's actually getting a couple of blocks and steals right now throughout the season as well, Melo. But say what you want about his defense, when he gets tight in the fourth quarter, he's a guy who you want open on the wing. He's a guy, if you switch a guard onto him, he's got that back down turnaround, and it's money. He hit 2 or 3 massive shots for the Blazers in the bubble, and that just gives more confidence for them in him. And I really, really like their fourth quarter lineup. I think it's awesome. I think they're really tough to stop in the fourth quarter with those kind of scoring output.
Yeah, it's fair. I'm going to lay out the case for why they're not, because I've got him as my second pretender. So I'll cover that off now. But
good.
It has to start with Nurkic.
Let's jump to it.
He has shit the bed so far, to put it frank. Add him to the list of guys who have looked overweight, if you want to add him to, the Harden category. I'm not sure what's up with him. I know he had some personal issues. I know there was stuff around family deaths and all of that stuff, but he hasn't been anything similar to what he was like in the bubble. He played a little bit better against Sacramento yesterday, but overall it hasn't been great. I think you can almost put Portland in the same category as Denver for their defense. They've really struggled to lock down teams this year. Again, they're not the Wizards bad, but they're not too far off. I think the Blazers fans are really starting to get the Robert Covington experience, which is an extremely streaky shooter. He's as good as he is. He's streaky when it comes down to it. He'll go 6 of 10 from deep one night and shoot 0 of 8 the next night. So that's something you obviously have to deal with. And man, if not for a career year from CJ, like you've just outlined, and Dame being Dame, I actually think the Blazers would kind of be in a little bit of trouble, because an area I thought they really should target, and I think we mentioned it in the preseason pod we did with Pat, that I thought the Blazers should have signed a backup point guard, whether it be a DJ Augustine or someone else who's just on the market. Because if we've known anything from watching Portland, it's that CJ and Dame have to play a ton of minutes every single night.
Led the league in minutes last year.
So, and it's probably high again this season. I haven't checked or watched it closely enough, but I'd imagine they'd both be high 30s. I can't see a way it's not.
The Thibodeau's taken over he's given Randall the most minutes in the league.
Oh, okay.
Well, RJ Barrett and Randall are 1 and 2.
Okay, perfect. Well, Dame and CJ must be top 10. I can't imagine they wouldn't be close to that. But crap, that would just give those guys so much relief if they just had someone who could just come in and just be reliable and give them a little bit of a break. Anthony Simon's proven he hasn't taken that next step.
Where is he? I don't even know.
We are again, we haven't seen the full Blazers lineup because they don't have Zach Collins. Obviously been injured. Zach Collins would definitely be in the rotation if he's not starting.
Rodney Hood's not really in it right now. He's still working his way back.
Yeah, so maybe it is early, but so far from what I've seen, I've got to put him in the pretender category. But I get that does come with some debate, because Portland have been pretty good in the fourth quarter the last few games. I mean, if they were very good yesterday to end the third and finish off the fourth to beat Sac. As you say, they were able to beat Toronto and come back from that when they looked out of it. and I haven't checked, but I will do right now. So I said they were down 24 at halftime to the Pacers.
Indiana?
And okay, they're down 24 still. There's a minute left to go in the game. All right, so that game's done. I was going to say if Portland managed to come back from that, then, geez, I might have had to quickly put a contender in front of that instead of pretender. But yeah, just for those reasons, I think if CJ wasn't having an unbelievable year, Portland would be sub 500. So there's a lot of, let's say, question marks for me for this Blazers team.
Yeah, I think you're right about Nurk as well. He has definitely been up and down, and he just looks fatigued and tired right now. So I'm not really sure. I think it's important. They've been to the playoffs. They know that they have to be balling at the right time. They have to be primed for the right time in the season, and you hope that Nurk can do that. I know that Dame trusts Nurk a lot, so I think that they're not going to give up on him necessarily, or they're not going to panic too much. But I also think you're right about the backup point guard spot. It's the deepest position in the league. Like, you can go find great point guards in the G League who might be able to help you right now. So I think, I think they've got moves to make. And I think right now they're still feeling out their rotation for sure. It's not clear with Stotts who he loves in his favorite five. I think right now Trent basically needs to be a starter, but they don't want to give up on Derek Jones Jr. too early. Rodney Hood's not quite in it yet. And yeah, Zach Collins we'd love to see lots of him, especially with Nurk kind of struggling. So I think there's still a lot of kind of change in rotation for Portland to keep going. So I'm interested to see how they'll develop throughout the season. And then when it comes to winning time, we'll just wait and see if they can get it done.
Yeah, for sure. I will go with my second contender. And I know I said I didn't have them, but I do. I've got Philly. I'll try and not be too much of an homer, but just simply Embiid's at MVP level. He was unbelievable. Yes, Simmons may have not developed with his scoring, but he's elite at about every other category: defense, passing, rebounding. There's a lot to like about his game. Tobias Harris, he came back from 3 games. I think he missed from COVID protocols, but before then he was having a really nice stretch, and it was very much looking like Clippers Tobias. So Doc seems to have worked his magic. And again, I'll speak about Philly a bit more and why I'm a bit frustrated over the past couple of weeks due to the COVID situation. But if anything positive was to come from that situation, is that Tyrese Maxey emerged. People really got to see him.
Milton was balling today too.
Milton went off today, his first game back. I don't think he gets enough love for 6 man. He was my pick for 6 man of the year, as you know, Gus. So we'll see how that goes towards the end of the year. Obviously, I've mentioned it before, but Dwight's been super impactful off the bench. And the last thing I'll say,
is out right now.
Yeah, Korkmaz is out. But if we didn't get screwed by COVID, I think we should only have 2 losses, and that's the blowout to the Cavs, who asterisk was without Embiid for that game, and then the loss at Brooklyn. So that's probably the 2 legitimate losses that I'll accept, but the other ones I struggle to accept. And I think we also have the ability to acquire some more helpful pieces at the deadline. If it's not a game changer like a Brad Beal, why can't we go out and get a guy like PJ Tucker?
Yeah, that'd be interesting. He's definitely a guy I think are on a lot of teams' radars with the switch up in Houston. I don't think he wants to be there for a kind of rebuild. I think he's desperate to get out of there. He would be nice in that wing spot, a defender who can shoot corner threes. He's up over 50% shooting from 3, PJ Tucker, this season. And who's number 1 in the league at almost 60% is Seth Curry. So he's already paying fruit for that pickup. Yep. And then Danny Green had an absolute stinker of a game. And then in typical Danny Green fashion, the next game dropped Sixers franchise high 9 3-pointers. So they've addressed that shooting, and it's paying dividends already, Philly, and they could even make more moves.
Yeah, so I'm very excited, very pumped about them. Your second pretender.
Second pretender, okay. I touched on them a little bit before, but the Indiana Pacers, I like what they're doing right now. I really love what they're playing. It's tough to say this
contender?
Because how well. I reckon right now I don't think they're in championship contender because the Levert pickup really does something different for them. It changes their style, so I suppose that could change. But for me, what I've seen from them is that they're missing TJ Warren a lot. I think without TJ Warren, and now they've just lost 20 points per game in Oladipo, you have to hope that Levert can come in and start being a 20-point scorer for them. I know Miles Turner's had a couple of nice games, and I do like their coach and the way that they're playing right now. This is not necessarily a knock on them because I really like them. I just think they're a year away from being a genuine contender. When you look at how Brooklyn is now a superstar team. I just don't think Indiana can hang with them right now.
Okay. Yeah. I love Indiana. You were high on them in the preseason. I wasn't high on them, but since watching them play, like I almost have them as a team other than Philly that I love watching every single night. And I'm actually on the LeVert hype train. I really do think he could come in and hold his own, and if not, be a little bit better. And I think we're understating potentially how much of, let's say, a cancer. Well, cancer is a harsh word, but how much Oladipo was actually disliked in that locker room. And I think that's a team that is all about cohesion. Their new coach is Nate Bjorkgren, and he came from Toronto, and those Toronto teams were very tight knit. And there were some mentions that Bjorkgren was really the mastermind behind some of the stuff that Nurse was able to implement. If you want to look at the box and one they ran, you saw it actually happen in back-to-back games because Toronto played at Golden State and they used a box and one against Steph, and Steph really struggled and was still fortunate to get the win, if not for Siakam missing that shot at the end. And then the next night or a couple nights after, they played the Pacers, and the Pacers did the exact same thing. And
got a good win.
I just think with the Pacers, if you want to look at something that I didn't think would happen, Miles Turner taking a little bit of a jump offensively. So he knew his defense and obviously how good he is at protecting the rim. But these last couple of games, he started to be a little bit more impactful on offense.
Shooting the three ball really well.
And that opens up sort of the floor in the game completely. And I do think LeVert can come in and be that 20-point guy. He was able to do that, obviously, with the Nets bubble team as being sort of the main focal point. I think he obviously will have to learn how to play with guys around him because I think he's so used to just having the ball in his hands. All those Nets teams in the past that were obviously pretty young with him and Jared Allen, it was basically LeVert's chance to go to work. We got a little bit of a sample of LeVert getting to go to work if Kyrie and KD were missing games. So he does have to learn how to fit in a little bit and not just basically chuck up 20 plus shots a game himself. But I'm very high on Karras. I think Nate Bjorkgren can figure out a way to best maximize LeVert. And the thing that's kind of underrated about this is Oladipo was an expiring contract. I know it doesn't have much to do with particularly this season and how they'll go, but in terms of their on-court, but the fact that they were able to get an asset for Oladipo, who wasn't probably going to re-sign with the Pacers, I think that was a good get for them to be able to turn that into Karras. And man, the only thing I want to see is a little bit more consistency out of Sabonis's jumper. I know he's been ridiculous down low. He obviously works the board so hard. His work rate is second to none.
Brogdon's been setting him up beautifully.
Yeah, Brogdon and him pick and roll is filthy. But I need to, if he unlocks that outside J, that'll completely change his game. Because at the moment, anytime he struggles, it's when guys are playing him for that jumper and they're always forcing him as well to really go to that right. And he hates going to the right. He doesn't have a great right hand.
Like all lefties.
Around the basket, he's very good. But just in terms of if he's just say 5-6 feet away from the basket, he always is doing a move to get back to his left. And yes, it's obviously because he's left-hand dominant, but its kind of greatest strength is his greatest weakness. And sometimes he just forces it too much with the left because, really elite defenders like a Draymond Green the other night, they could just read that from, every time he was looking to do a move, it was to come back to the left. So some few things I want to see him work on, but I'm still really high on him, Darson. I think they could almost end up top 4. I actually do think they'll finish top 4 in the East. And I think it goes back to just get in the playoffs and see what happens. I wouldn't necessarily put him as a contender, but I don't think I think it's harsh to put him as a pretender. I'll say that.
Yeah, I suppose that's where I kind of landed on it. It's just they're just below that level of pretender. I don't think they can actually win the championship this year. But, in a year's time, we could be looking at one of the best young team in the league, potentially, or at least in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, that's perfect. That covers off on the pretenders contender.
Good segment.
Now, I want to hit on Philly. I messaged you this a couple of days ago when we were prepping for this pod that I wanted to touch on Philly. So
the COVID
the COVID thing, the main thing I was very upset about and pretty frustrated. And Philly had 7 guys available for their home game against the Denver Nuggets.
Yeah.
Because we basically have a COVID outbreak with Seth Curry getting positive tests. Some people would know about that. But basically that happened where Curry was on the bench for a game against Brooklyn. Curry was pulled from the game at halftime. He wasn't playing in that game, but he was sitting on the bench. He was battling an ankle injury. We got pulled from the game because an inconclusive test before the game came back at halftime that it was actually positive. So again, I don't know how a player can get let out when it's inconclusive. I thought it was something that they were pretty strict on, that unless they were sure, they weren't going to let you, with other players, with be it on the same team or in a different team with close contact, obviously. But anyway, that occurred. And so we had 7 guys available, healthy, fit.
Yeah.
The league forced us to dress an 8th, and that was Mike Scott, who was coming back from injury and was not right to play in that game. So because of that, we had to suit up 7 guys against a fully healthy Denver team. Denver were able to come out and pretty much smoke us in the end, minus Maxey going for 40. But what then proceeded was the following 24 hours, we had a Miami-Boston game postponed. We had some other games postponed as well. I forget the list, but basically that after the Philly game, that started a stretch run of at least 4 or 5 games that were suddenly postponed because of COVID outbreaks. And it was because they didn't have 8 guys available. And so my question comes back to Jesus, how can Philly be forced to play that game in particular? I get that the league wanted to set a precedence and go, no, well, look, this is Philly just going through its struggles. If another team is in the same situation that Philly is in, they'll be forced to play games due to balance. But then we see other teams that obviously have to postpone their games because they don't have 8 guys available. But Philly were forced to play not only that game, but the Atlanta game as well, which Embiid did come back for and play. But we just didn't have enough guys. We got killed. I mean, Embiid was forced into double teams every time he caught the ball. And anyway, we got blown out in the end. That was the final story. But games are being postponed left, right, and center, Das. And Philly were forced to play those 2 games in particular. So this could be just be me whinging. But I'd love to know just your thoughts on, if not the Philly situation, the league postponing games in general.
Oh, it's definitely a dilemma. And I think it's kind of the first adversity that the league has had to kind of tackle with COVID, because considering they got basically an A+ for their effort in the bubble, 0 positive tests, that you can't get much better than that.
Yeah.
But obviously they seem to have protocols in place, but when they start to break down, like you talked about with Seth Curry, and I think it was Bradley Beal also was in close contact with someone, and
with Tatum.
that led to and that led to the Celtics problems with getting games postponed and missing guys like my boy Time Lord. But they've had a meeting, and they're going to be much tighter on the protocols. Obviously, in hindsight, it's much easier to say, we'll be tighter, but it's hard to say when, these guys are playing and they're sweating all on top of each other all the time, and you can't get any much closer contact than that. And then when you talk about them being on the sideline and one guy's tested positive, so now everyone who's been in close contact with him is now at a risk and has to quarantine. So it's a really difficult situation, and I guess the league will be tiptoeing it as much as they can. The league are always going to side with the players, I think, and that's come down from Adam Silver. They're always going to try to accommodate the players as much as they can to get them on the floor and to keep them available. And that's why they're doing this postponing of games. They're not putting a situation where he's not taking a hard line, Adam Silver, and saying, we're playing these games no matter what. If you guys muck up and get, contract COVID, then that's on you. That's the kind of approach that the NFL's taking. But with the NBA, they're trying to accommodate it as much as they can and try to keep everyone happy from both parties as much as possible. It's obviously making for a bit of a dilemma with, the last 4 or 5 days. Every single day there's been a game being postponed, and that's no good. But I think when it comes down to what a team needs and what a team wants, when it's a situation, I guess Philly were fortunate they got off to such a good start, they could afford to just eventually lose their game.
Yeah.
But when it comes down to postponing that game, and then what that means is later on in the season, you're going to have to play an extra game in a week. And that's probably going to make your team a lot, it's going to be a logistical problem, and it's going to put some strain on your rotation. And if you've got injuries at that time, it's going to make that week really difficult to win a few games. So if you end up with 4 or 5 games in 1 week, you're almost definitely going to cop a loss or 2. So it's almost like, should we shoot up 7 or 8 guys, give these young guys a little go and almost kind of semi-tank this game, or give it our best without our best players on the floor, and just make sure that we stick to the schedule so that we can win the games that we're supposed to win when we've got a healthy lineup later on? Or, do we kind of do whatever we can to make sure that this is postponed so that we don't waste this game and then try to make it up in a tough week later on in the season? So I think there's kind of a bit of a toss up there, and there's, there's never going to be a perfect way to do it. COVID's kind of got its own agenda for how it's going to roll throughout the NBA season, but it's something that's going to keep coming. It's going to keep being a problem for the rest of the season. So I think the NBA will have to be as tight as they can, and the players will just have to be really diligent and try to avoid it at all costs.
Yeah. Das, breaking news. Injury with Portland.
Oh, no.
Yusuf Nurkic, broken wrist.
Broken wrist, that's bad.
Fractured wrist. So I'm not sure how long that puts him out, but I thought to bring that up. I know you're in the
same injury as Cat.
Cat was a sprain. I thought Cat was a sprain.
Oh,
okay. This is a broken wrist. Fractured right wrist against the Pacers. So, I mean, maybe that doesn't change too much for Portland, because Nurkic has been a 0 for the most part to start the season. So maybe, he's injured his wrist. He hasn't injured his legs. So maybe Nurkic can get on the treadmill and lose some of those kgs.
He better start playing for the playoffs already, 72-game season. If he's going to miss another 20 or something, that'd be interesting. Yeah, it sucks that they don't have Zach Collins right now. This would be perfect for him. All right, Zach, you're in the starting lineup. You're the man. Let's go. Lucky that Cantor's playing really well.
Your boy,
at least on offense he is. So good time to have him in fantasy for anyone who does. I picked
potential
him up last
waiver wire
week.
pickup.
It's looking real good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sucks for Nurkic though.
Yeah, that does. So anyway, that was that first bit of breaking news really for the pod there, Dus. We'll see how many times that happens throughout. But
got anything else on Philly? I think it was great to see Maxey. I didn't know that he had those in him. Clearly, he's a bit of a dog. He's a guy who's on Clutch Sports, and you can see what kind of Rich Paul and LeBron can see in him. He's tough, and he reckons he's ready for this league right now. Anyone who could drop 39 points in an NBA game and then back it up with another huge game a week later, he's clearly going to be a bit of a player for them.
Yeah, no, he was awesome in particular in that Denver game, but he's been awesome all season for the most part in limited minutes off the bench.
He's not scared.
No, he's not. Something that he didn't do for his first 3 or 4 games was take a jumper. He was driving to the rim, driving, and he has really nice touch with his floater. I would say he's a young Mike Conley in that respect. Not that he uses both hands, but just he has a really good feel around the rim. Relentless, loves attacking, and he's actually very self-aware. So he's never going to really force a bad shot. It seems as though any shot he's taking is very much in the flow of the offense, or when sort of the play breaks down. It's never sort of a rush shot, 20 seconds left on the shot clock, Marcus Smart type, BS3. Though
he seems like a guy who puts in the work. You can tell by the way he gets into his jump shot.
Yeah, so it could be crazy to say, but when yesterday I saw that he could have been packaged with Simmons for Harden, I was like, fuck, I don't like that. And that just, look, part of that's being a homer, but he has been very good, Maxey. And it's something I'm very pleased about. It's good signs, because for the most part, Seibel hasn't been very good. You can't think of too many other draft picks that have late first draft picks, at least since the Hinkie era ended, that actually panned out. If you want to go back and look at Fultz or anyone else, none of our picks have panned out really since Hinkie left. So this is the first one.
Lost a couple of them to get Butler as well.
Correct, yeah, and obviously lost Shamet, who could now be a big piece off that Brooklyn bench. He hasn't been great for Brooklyn this year, but
interesting.
His shots kind of dropped off just a little bit, but yeah. I love Maxey, obsessed with him. I might get a jersey. I think I've got to add to the collection. But yeah, interesting to see where the league goes with tightening the COVID stuff. I think they do need to. I think this has been a bit of a wake-up call. They've got to fix it. I heard that, I don't know if it's still the case now, but for the start of the season, if you were on a road trip, you were allowed to have one guest you're allowed to come to your hotel room, be it family or a special friend,
relative,
right? So some of these guys that have, basically a roster of girls, that already have them set up with their room key for when they land and whatnot. Yeah, it's ridiculous that they were allowed to do that, but Yeah, I would have thought the best way to do it was some sort of 3 or 4 market bubble situation, not necessarily one hub, one main hub, but rather 3 or 4 scattered. But I know the pushback from the players was pretty legit about that. They were not fans of the bubble. There was a lot that they didn't like about Orlando, as successful as it was. I think behind the scenes, there was a lot of complaining and a lot of like, man, I don't think we can do this again. So Adam Silver was in a tough situation, but I think the way things have gone so far, he hasn't done the best job with this season. Felt like it was pretty rushed at the time. We did get the news about, if they delayed it until mid-Jan, that would have given them more time to set up things, but apparently they would have lost $500 million in revenue as opposed to starting it when they did. So, I mean, money
they can't
talks,
afford to lose these games. They got to play this 72-game season to get it back on schedule with next year's season, and also just to make sure that we get NBA games to watch. They need to make that revenue off TV.
Hopefully things will start to be a little bit better in terms of how the league handles these games, because we're pretty frustrated with seeing them postponed anyway. I know a lot of people's fantasy teams getting killed by really needing certain guys to play, and then it gets postponed. So
my team's so healthy, it's lucky.
Wow. Okay. Maybe your time's coming then, Dust.
Well, Phoenix, I've got Chris Paul and Phoenix is off tomorrow, so that's not good.
Okay.
They only got 7 players.
So there you go. Okay. Locks of the day. Now, we'll quickly review how you've been going. Darcy, you've been shitting gold. You've been producing the goods. You've been absolutely balling. So I've got you down after
6 straight, I think.
Yes, you hit 6 straight. You missed today's one, but it puts you at 15 and 13 overall. So you've come back really hard. I'm sitting at 11 and 10, not including today's. I had the over for today's Denver Golden State game, which I think was 220
or something.
I don't know how it's gone. 114 to 104. So that's 218. Okay, so I didn't hit that. So that puts me 11 and 11.
Okay.
You want to take it away with your lock of the day and that'll be for Saturday. So Saturday the 16th for people that are listening.
Okay, Saturday the 16th, game of the day, Mavericks versus Milwaukee. Guarantee I'll be watching every single minute of this one. I've got my boy, I'm pretty sure he's back in the lineup because he's on the sports bet line right now. Porzingis back in the lineup. He likes playing against Milwaukee. In the 2 games that we played at Milwaukee last season, he was absolutely dominant. I think for both those games, I think Doncic missed, and he killed it in both those games. His line is, I'm going over on points for Porzingis. 15.5 points seems a bit low for a guy like him. $1.79. I think that's a bit of a lock. Yeah,
that's an awesome one. Minutes, are you worried about that?
Maybe a little bit, but
what do you play? Do you play 20 something against Charlotte or 20 plus?
20 something against Charlotte, and I think he had 19 points. He shot it every time he got it, basically to get his rhythm right. And his stroke looks good, and all he does is shoot threes, basically. So every time he puts it up, we're getting 3 extra points. I think what he needs to hit 4 threes and then maybe 1 layup, and then he'll get that done. I think that's
get to the free throw line as well. A lot of people tend to foul him when he just turns around and raises up like that. So he's a super tough guy to defend, that's for sure. 15.5 as well.
Yeah, pretty low.
Seems low. For me, to get me above 500, I don't want to start to fall down below here. Kawhi over 26.5 points, $1.93. They're coming up against Sacramento. If the Kings are good at one thing, it's giving up points. Kings in their last 6 games, Das, they're giving up an average of 131.5 points. So the Kings have kept a lot of these games close, but that's just due to their offense basically being pretty explosive. But defense is something that they're really struggling with. I think there'll be plenty of opportunity to get points in this one. I can't see a direct matchup that'll be able to slow down Kawhi. I think the good thing about this is Sacramento are coming off a tough home loss against Portland. So they'll want to keep this game close. It's another home game. And so I like to think Kawhi will score in the early to mid 30s. So I think it's pretty good value to get him at 26.5.
They've needed his buckets in every win. There's no doubt that they need him to score, even with Paul George shooting the ball at close to 50%. He's shooting, and I think he's shooting over 50% from 3, Paul George, right now. He's balling, but still, for them to get wins, they need Kawhi to score. They need him to be that alpha.
I think we covered off on a lot today. So obviously the big Harden trade, his debut will most likely be Sunday if you're in Australia. I think Nets have a home game against the Magic.
Must watch.
So must watch. And hopefully Kyrie's back for that if he decides to
If they find him.
If they find him, if he decides, I'll actually come in and do my job, which will be great. I was actually very hesitant to comment on that just in case he had, some serious personal stuff going on. But when it was shown he was at his sister's party and something else leaked, he was on a Zoom chat the other day and, he's...
Just get on the floor, mate, please.
I don't know what he's doing. Is he taking work from home a bit too literally? Like, I don't know. Like, you can't play ball from your living room, Curry. You need to be out on the floor at Barclays. So hopefully he's back. I want to see it all. Even if it is Harden and KD, that'll still be great. But I want to see all three together. Give me that chaos right from the start.
Give me that death line up for sure.
And for the most part, it should be a pretty easy dub against the struggling Orlando team. So good team to come and test that out. So
good little warm-up game.
Well, that takes care of things for today. Das, all the best for tomorrow with that Bucks matchup. I know you are short-handed.
Let's go, baby.
No Finney-Smith, no Richardson, no Brunson. If we still get the dub, man.
Yeah, let's start the Aussie. Let's start Josh Green. Come on. Well, Trey Burke balled out, and when he got a little bit more run the other day, he's finally trying to hit a bit of a stride. If Brunson has a good game, Brunson likes playing against Milwaukee, likes going up against DiVincenzo, his old teammate. Yeah, I really like to see it. Having Kleber out hurts a little bit, but Cauley Stein's been okay so far.
Yeah,
should be a good game.
And Boban, we always love it. More Boban.
Oh yeah. All right, mate. Thanks, Chris.
No worries, Das. Speak soon. Oh yeah, finish your make. Let's go.